for your patience. We are running late in the press conference that is taking place in Brussels, but our thanks to Columbia Law School Professor Arnie Bradford, greatly appreciated. So let's turn back to the markets and talk a little bit about what's been happening. It's been a banner year for investment banking despite the pandemic. Just last week, we saw those blockbuster IPOs, Airbnb, DoorDash. Bloomberg's Sonali Basak is now with a top deal maker from Moelis, the co-president, Navid Mahmoud Zageda. I think I've completely mispronounced that, Sonali. Help me out.
I got you, Guy. We have Navid Mahmoudzadegan again with us. Thank you, Navid, for joining us. And speaking to those IPOs, I think Alex, Guy, and I are still a little stunned from those rallies we've seen. I wanted to ask you about this because you're not an underwriter, so you don't have a stake in the game that way, but you do have a big capital markets practice that you're trying to grow. What do we think about this exuberance? Are we in bubble territory?
Hello, Sonali. Pleasure to be here. And look, I think you're right to be, slightly astounded by some of the stock price performances of these IPOs. Look, these are great companies that are going public. I think they have real and sustainable business models, and they're here to stay. One can question, some of the valuations we've seen recently and whether there's some froth in those valuations, but I think many of these companies that are going public are, really incredible companies run by real leaders, and they're here to stay. So we'll see how they trade over time, but clearly we're in one of those periods where the market's valuing growth and putting a huge premium on companies that are growing fast.
But, some of this exuberance, what's surprising me is that it's really floating over into other areas. And when I talk to some of your rivals, what they tell me is that they're hard-pressed to find a reason next year won't be incredible. Help me here. I'm counting on you to pour a little bit of reality on this, because what are the big risks into next year?
Well, look, I share the view that I think the M&A market, which has been very strong here for the last couple of quarters, is likely to continue to be very strong for the next number of quarters. Many of the underlying rationale and reasons for the market to be strong, strategic consolidation, companies looking for more growth and trying to figure out how to improve their growth profile. The major role private equity is playing in the M&A market these days. All of those things, I think, are likely to continue to drive the market higher. Having said that, look, we do have a fractured country, despite the fact that I think there's a fair amount of optimism about President-elect Biden and his ability to potentially bring this country together. I do think there's potentially political risks and stalemate around, government providing stimulus and other things that, we need to keep this economy moving. And so, if there's one risk out there, to me, it's that.
So there's a lot of exuberance around M&A, but also a lot of expectations around more bankruptcies into next year. What do you think will happen for the next 12 months? How aggressive are we going to see this pace of bankruptcies?
Well, I don't think you're going to see an aggressive pace of bankruptcies, especially if, we get stimulus and some of the things we need to make sure the economy keeps moving. But look, I do think there's a fair number of companies that were able to access liquidity in April and May and into the summer, which, bought them more time to get through, the crisis, but still have, fairly levered capital structures. And especially in some of these, structurally challenged, areas of the economy, if you have a company that, has too much leverage, even if you've been able to deal with the near-term liquidity issues, at some point, you have to deal with that balance sheet. And so I think we're going to likely to see over the next couple of years a steady stream of in-court and out-of-court restructurings, which will keep our restructuring bankers busy. But I don't think you're going to see a big wave unless there's a big turn down in the economy.
So this conundrum here is making it very difficult for investors to figure out how to invest, particularly the large credit investors. How do you expect people to start deploying capital over the next 6 months?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think over the last 6 months, it's really been about recovery, right? Which placing bets on companies and industries and sectors that were likely to recover, when we got through the crisis. I think as you look out in the next 6 months, I think it's going to be more about making decisions and placing bets where, with companies that are going to be benefiting once we come out of this post-COVID world. Nobody knows exactly how consumer behavior, corporate behavior is going to change on the other end of this crisis. There's lots of hypotheses out there about things that may happen, but nobody really knows. And I think the challenge for investors is trying to make those decisions going forward. I think it's not an easy thing to do.
Let's talk about how you do your job now too, because just a week ago, Ken Moelis, the CEO of Moelis & Company, had said that he would be letting more people work outside of New York, work outside of the main hub office. But I know there's a lot of concerns across the industry as well about how this next generation of talent is trained up when everybody is farther away from each other. How are you thinking about that issue?
Sure. Look, I do think it's apparent that there's going to be more companies that choose to relocate to, lower tax jurisdictions, lower regulatory jurisdictions. And I do think we'll have some of our bankers who choose to move to try to be closer to their clients and closer to some of these companies. And so, one of the things we want to do as a firm, because we're a talent-driven organization, is make sure that we're allowing our bankers to be close to their clients, especially during COVID, where we're all kind of working in a different way. We're trying to be a little bit more flexible. Having said all that, look, New York is the financial capital of the world. It's going to continue to be the financial capital of the world, in my view. It will always, I think, be the headquarters of Moelis & Company. I think we're always going to have more bankers there than anybody else. We're looking forward to getting our bankers back in the office when it's safe to do that. And I do think that, being together is important for culture, and I think it's important for training. There's always been an online and offline component of banker training, and our junior bankers are doing an incredible job of servicing clients and getting up to speed and learning the business. But there's nothing like being together.
And real quick here, I have one more question for you. You implied that CEOs are moving. It's not just the finance industry. How much is this bankers following clients that are moving their hubs outside of New York?
I think that's part of it. Look, there is at times an advantage, being close to your clients. And I do think, if we do see companies move to other places and we'll see bankers and other service professionals, move to try to be close to their key clients. And again, we want to be flexible to allow our bankers to do that so they can be maximally productive. And I think we've seen, through some of the online tools, that you can be productive even if you're not in a major hub.
Navid, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to have you back soon. Alex, back to you.
All right, Sonali, great interview. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Quick check-in here on the markets. We are still waiting for Margaret Vestager to end her press conference so she can then talk to Bloomberg, and we'll bring you that when it crosses. Latest headline, though, from Politico. Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker, inviting McCarthy, Schumer, and McConnell, so White House Chief of Staff and the Senate Majority Leader and Senate Minority Leader to chat. Presumably that would be then about stimulus. The deal seems to be getting smaller, but will we actually get it done by the end of the week? The market's still relatively optimistic. You have the S&P up by 0.5%. The biotech index, though, rolling over. The NASDAQ rolling over a little bit as well as we're waiting those tech regulations coming out of Europe. It seems like they could be hitting by mid-2022. I do want to highlight what's happening with the bond market. At 90 basis points is where we sit. The Fed begins its meeting today. I feel like we didn't even talk about it. If we do get a stimulus, are we going to have to see actually more buying from the Fed in terms of long-term bonds to keep a lid under the 10-year there, or can we handle a 1%? All of that to dissect over the next 24 hours. That wraps it up for me and Guy here in New York and also in London. Coming up, John Yarmuth, U.S. House Budget Committee Chairman. He'll be joining Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Television and Radio. This is Bloomberg.
From New York to our Bloomberg television and radio audiences worldwide, I'm David Weston. Welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. We want to start with the markets as we do every day, and Abigail Doolittle. So, Abigail, just glancing at it, looks like the S&P kind of is coming back today.
Yes, it is. And in fact, the first up day in 5